Good evening and welcome. This is the People's Platform. Sri Lanka is a member, an observer, a dialogue partner of several international organizations. But how have we fared in terms of our interactions, engagements with these parties? How has Sri Lanka's role been in terms of the multilateral role it has to play? To discuss this, we are joined by Dr. George Cook. He's a diplomatic historian and strategist. Good evening and welcome, George.
Good evening.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. George, before delving into the conversation, let's give our viewers an understanding of the concepts of bilateralism and multilateralism and how both play into diplomatic strategy.
Absolutely. So when we talk about bilateralism, we're talking chiefly about two. So it's our relationship vis-a-vis another country. But when we go into the multilateral arena, this is where we are looking at Sri Lanka engaging with a lot of countries at once. And this is where we have several international organizations, groupings that have taken place. We sometimes refer to them based on regions, like we have SAARC, or BIMSTEC, which is within regions, which is geography based. Multilateralism can also extend even further. On the largest scale would be the United Nations. But we also look at it how groups of countries have come together based on trade, based on history, based on language, based on culture, based on religion, based on research. We have so many that have come together to form multiple spaces that exist, and that is where multilateralism becomes very important for a country like Sri Lanka, because we don't have embassies in every country out there in the world. So this is where we've got to reach out to as many as possible in these multilateral fora.
When we speak about reaching out to other organizations internationally, the key ambassador from Sri Lanka would be the foreign minister and by extension the foreign ministry. Let's first speak about how successful we've been as a country in terms of resourcing it adequately, in terms of equipping it with the necessary experts.
So we go back to independence, and in 1949 we had the first batch of the Sri Lanka Overseas Service, or the Ceylon Overseas Service as it was known at the time. And from that point onwards there's been regular recruitment, because the Foreign Service is the institution within the Foreign Ministry that is involved in diplomacy, the diplomats, so to say. And thereafter we've seen different ministers. From independence up to 1977, the Prime Minister was the Foreign Minister. The Prime Minister was also Defence Minister. But in 1977, Jaya Jayawardena upon election did not take on the position of Foreign Minister. That was given to our first non-Prime Ministerial Foreign Minister, who was A.C.S. Hamid. Thereafter, we saw foreign ministers being appointed under consecutive presidents. The relationship has been very different. In some instances they've gelled very well, in some instances things have not always gone very well. But one thing that we've got to always bear in mind is that the Foreign Minister and the Foreign Ministry, the Foreign Ministry especially, is supposed to be the bureaucratic institution which has the people with the expertise. They are the ones who are supposed to know the inside out of this particular field. They are the ones who have to advise, give options to the minister, because a minister is a politician. And sometimes a minister might bring experience, sometimes a minister might not. And this is where the minister is strengthened that much more with a very strong foreign service. So you've got to have people in there who have the expertise, who have the experience, who have the knowledge, who have seen the world, they've traveled the world, they've lived around the world. They've not been hiding under a stone somewhere overseas. They've been interacting. You're bringing back a lot of experience. And this is what you expect from the Foreign Ministry, because it is equipped with a large number of personnel who are supposed to be understanding world affairs.
Right.
As to whether that actually translates in that way sometimes, it's questionable. When we look at some of the decisions that we've been taking in the recent past, or we go back in time, there have been numerous instances in which we've made very good choices, very good decisions, and sometimes it has not been the case. Unfortunately, when it comes to foreign policy, if you mess up your foreign policy, it can even lead to war. This is where it is absolutely essential that foreign policy is not just another policy in the country. It's not just looking at it as another sector of the government, another sector of the state. It is a very crucial arm of the government which is involved in interacting with the world. Sonali, when we talk about things that we want investment. We want more trading opportunities. We want to boost our tourism. We want a lot of things from the outside world. What is the agency or the entity that is involved in doing that? The foreign ministry. This is where, when you look at budgetary allocations, the foreign ministry should be way up there, considered where it is right now. We need to really expand the foreign service, look at equipping it that much more, enhancing knowledge. This is very important. We need to bring in expertise. People in the foreign ministry are not going to be just drafting letters or drafting speeches, full stop. That should not be the case. You should have input into policy formulation, contribute, give options, give ideas, give suggestions. The leader at that time, the president, the foreign minister will make the key decision. But they need to have options and alternatives on the table before them. But what happens sometimes is, it is awaited. The directive is awaited. And at that point, that person may be looking at it from a certain angle, a certain prism. That might not be very favorable. We go back to 1979. The Soviet Union went into Afghanistan. A.C.S. Hamid is foreign minister. Jaya Jayawardena is known to take on a very pro-American stance. He wanted a strong statement condemning the Soviet Union. A.C.S. Hamid balanced it out. He did not want to take on too strong a position. We are a non-aligned country. Now, at that point, you saw a deterioration in the link between the presidency and the ministry, because the president wanted the Soviet Union to be pulled up at that stage, but we went on a more balanced line. So it depends, and of course that was the right thing to do at that stance, because later on Russia is a country that has consistently supported Sri Lanka, especially in the Security Council. And we've got to be very mindful of what was happening in Afghanistan at that time. There was a communist government in Afghanistan. Invasion, invitation, that's another debate that we can go into about 1979. But it's very important for us to try to understand that when it comes to making a decision, the minister or the president must have the options on the table. Then they can make the call.
All right. George, let's also talk about the importance of crafting a positive image for Sri Lanka internationally. This is crucial because over the past few years, we've seen the manner in which we have made it to the international headlines, and it has been overwhelmingly negative, piteous. We have been used as an example of what not to be, of what not to end up as, which is deeply tragic. So, could you speak about the importance of strategy and positive messaging, and also how to use technology on the one hand, expertise which is multi-pronged on the other, and also the importance of marketing?
Sonali, when we go back in time, and if we just take it, because we're talking about multilateralism as well this evening, if you look at Sri Lanka in the UNGA, we only get into the UN in 1955. Many years after we had gained independence, and that's because the Soviet Union vetoed us. They believed that we did not have real independence because we were a dominion, but it wasn't a problem they had only with us. It was also because the Americans and the British were vetoing several Soviet Union countries from joining the UN. But after that, if you look at that journey from 55 until the early 80s, Sri Lanka is taking a very different stance to what we have seen in the last 4 decades. In the last 4 decades, and this is where 82, 83, these are turning points. This is where we are now going to the UN and we are asking for understanding. We are asking for time. We are asking them to try to comprehend the situation we are facing. Before that, we were taking on world leaders. We were talking about reform within their countries. We were questioning nuclear policies. We were questioning the testing of nuclear weapons. We were saying, how on earth can you do this? You're affecting all of us. We were really taking a high moral ground at that point. But you see, the 80s really changed that trajectory that we were on, and this is where a non-state actor changed this country's path, most unfortunately. From then to now, what have we done in terms of overcoming the negativity that comes with the conflict? It is inherent, it is a part and parcel of it, but we've got to overcome it. Now, during the entirety of the conflict, we had investment. We had tourists coming, we had trade taking place, everything didn't stop. But we obviously look at it now from 2009 to now, we are 14 years after the end of the fighting on the ground. We should really see a massive heightening of our international interaction. Sri Lanka should be a country that is out there now talking about counter-terrorism expertise, sharing what we have. Maybe everybody won't want to listen to it. That's a different matter. But there are countries out there which will want to listen to us, which will want to interact with us. This is where we need to be really doing a lot more to share what we have. We don't join international organizations or go overseas to see what we can only get. We must also see what we can give. What are we taking to the table? What are we offering them? Is it always a bilateral meeting? Is it always a case of, can I have this and can we have that and could you extend this? Could you delay this? That's not what it should be. We should also be saying, we have this, can we offer this to you? What else can we do? That is where they are also going to realize that we're not just jumping to come and grab things from them, but we are also in a position to offer something, however small it may be. That is where the image, the mentality, the attitude will start changing. Unfortunately, now what are we saying? Go and get as much investment as possible. We don't care what the investment is. Let them come and invest even in a matchstick factory, let them come and invest. That should not be the case. Whatever the investment that is being brought into the country must fit into a national plan of investment in this country. It should fulfill our needs. Now, that is a mismatch that is taking place over there. But looking at that whole building a positive image of the country, many people out there are not checking the news every day to see what has happened in Sri Lanka. We don't check what's happening in every country around the world. We don't get up every morning and check world news of developments in every 190 odd country out there. What do we need to do? We need to start rebranding the country. Everybody out there has this notion of conflict in Sri Lanka. Has it ended? Has it not ended? What is exactly going on the ground? They hear something from Geneva. They hear a statement coming from certain quarters. Oh, maybe the situation is really bad in Sri Lanka. Now, it doesn't take a lot. Now, we'll sit back and think, oh, it involves a lot of money. And we don't have the necessary finances for that. That is not the case. You have goodwill with countries. I'll give you an example. If you go through some of the Chinese subways, there are massive advertisements of the Maldives. Now, has the Maldivian government paid for that advertising space? I think not. This is where there is goodwill being built up. We must know what to ask, what we can get out of those countries, what we can offer them in return. We need to be looking at upscaling the resources that we have within the country and what we can offer. We have tourists who want to come here, maybe they want some kind of special arrangements in their suite. Do we have a pool with every suite? Do we have special facilities that they want? Maybe we should look at that top-end tourist, which is something that we are probably not doing. Backpackers are coming to this country, and what are they doing? They are scrounging around to see how they can get a meal for less than $1. And for them, that's a big achievement. Now, that's not really boosting the country. It means that we are managing, we're okay, you come here, you can have a cheap holiday and go back. Now, if we want to really take the country up, we must showcase the country overseas. We talk about road shows. We talk about how we try to promote, have B2B activities, bring businesses together. What else are we doing in terms of that bigger picture of where we want to be? What are the sectors, specific sectors that we want to improve? Look at tea, for example. We are still selling tea leaves. The best tea leaves is being sold out of this country. Others are buying these tea leaves and they are converting that into tea essence, tea oil. They are really enhancing value and they are getting so much more out of it. And we are losing out there. Why can't we go into those areas? Why aren't we looking? Why aren't we encouraging the private sector to do this? This is where we need to have clear vision, direction and a strategy of where we want to be. Instead of getting up every morning and hoping we get through each day. Or hoping for a Friday to come along and we've gotten through the week. That is not the way for us to go forward. We really need a massive effort. We need an attitudinal change first internationally amongst the staff we send out there. Right. What you are promoting, they must be aware of it. They must understand the ground reality in the country. You can't go out there and lie. You can't say everything's wonderful and amazing if it's not. You have to discuss reality, but you've also got to discuss how the country is moving forward or what steps are being taken. Communication is so very important there. We need to speak to the world. We can't just sit there and hope tourists will come. We'll have an advertisement campaign and we'll hope they'll see it. Hope is amazing, but you can't live on hope every day. You need to take tangible action. We need work being done. That is sometimes missing.
All right. We're going for a short commercial break. We're in conversation with Dr. George Cook. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're with the People's Platform. We're talking to Dr. George Cook, diplomatic historian. George, before the break, you said that there needs to be an attitudinal shift. If we are to speak about the importance of knowledge and being aware, history education is of crucial importance as well. This concept of rootedness, the concept of knowing the role of Sri Lanka in the context of the region, the role of Sri Lanka in the context of the world, what have we done in the past? We need to be aware and cognizant of all of these things.
Absolutely. You take any form of engagement that we have in the world. How did it start? Why did we get involved in it? Why did we join organizations? Why didn't we join organizations? 1967, there was an opportunity to get into ASEAN, but we chose not to. You go back to 1955, we get into the UN. Within 5 years, Sonali, we are a member of the Security Council. In 61, we are chairing the Security Council. Sir Claude Correa is our ambassador. Sir Claude Correa is chairing the Security Council. After that, we've just taken a back seat when it comes to Security Council. We had an opportunity of getting elected, but we bartered that for opportunities elsewhere and we did not use it. If you look at 1976, we chaired the General Assembly. We presided over the General Assembly. Hamilton Shirley Amarasinghe was ambassador at the time. Now, where is that era? Are we aware of it? Do we know what happened there? 1985, why did South Asian countries get together and create an organization called SAARC? What did we hope to achieve out of SAARC? Why were we supportive of the mechanism? It might have floundered, there might be other issues that are affecting it today, but what are we doing to revive it? Are we contributing towards it? We are now a member of BIMSTEC. We were chairing BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical Economic Cooperation. During our chairing of BIMSTEC, did every Sri Lankan even know that we were chairing BIMSTEC? Leave 1955 and 60 and 61 aside, I'm talking about 2018 to 2022. Did we know that we were chairing BIMSTEC? At the end of this year, we're going to take over the chair of IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Is it going to be a very mundane chair like it was with BIMSTEC, or are we really going to do something? It all depends on the knowledge that we have. We must demand better standards, more involvement, more engagement. This is something we're not getting because people don't know. So those who are in positions who can do things also probably think, I have the position, let me just get to the end of the line and then we've done. We've presided over a meeting, we've had an inauguration. That's not it. Any of these international organizations, we need to know why we are in them, what we get out of them, because this is where, Sonali, our diplomats, when they go out there, when they are interacting in the world, they must be able to make connections with people. You know, when you meet someone from a certain country, you must know something about that country. You can't say, oh, where's that country on the map? Is there such a country? Oh, I've never heard of it. That's really a negative comment to make at that stage. You really need to be boosting Sri Lanka, using that opportunity of understanding it. But that's within those who are policy makers, who are contributing towards policy. But how much more it is important for us as citizens of the country to know all these things. We go back to 1954. Sir John Kotalawala is Prime Minister. He convenes a meeting of Prime Ministers from 5 countries, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Burma as it was called then, and Ceylon. This is where the whole idea of non-alignment or Afro-Asian solidarity was conceptualized. It went from Colombo to Bogor and then to Bandung in 55. In 61, we had Belgrade, Yugoslavia, and the first NAM summit. We played such a pioneering role. When we talk about the Cold War, we talk about the Americans on one side and the Soviets on the other. We've conveniently forgotten the role of the non-aligned movement. Historically, we need to know these things. We're now talking about the need for a new form of non-alignment. We use concepts, we talk about neutrality, we talk about non-alignment. Sometimes we use them as synonyms and they're not. We need to understand what they are. This is where education becomes so important, history becomes so important for the policymakers, also for the general public.
When speaking of diplomacy, there's this quote by British statesman Lord Palmerston, who, speaking at the House of Commons in 1848, said, "We have no eternal allies and we have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual, and those interests it is our duty to follow." So diplomacy requires, among other things, graciousness, farsightedness, and delicately balancing on a tightrope, as it were. Speak to us about how Sri Lanka must now walk this tightrope.
Use the word graciousness. This is where we've got to realize that we are a small country in the world. We are not the center of the universe or the center of the Indian Ocean. There are other countries would also lay claim to being that. We are geographically in an important position, but it does not mean that we are the only location in this area. There are other facilities that are being developed. When you think about how we respond sometimes to statements from certain capitals, statements from certain leaders out there, we tend to forget our size, our ability, our relevance on the world stage.
Right.
The Canadian Prime Minister had something to say about Sri Lanka in a rather strong way. There has been the passing of a lot of legislation within a certain parliament in that country. Now, it took a long time for that to be ratified, passed on to royal assent. What are we doing from the entirety of that process? So, it's done now. Something has happened there. But then how do we respond? We've got to be very mindful that we can't turn our noses up to the Canadians. That is also an influential country on the world stage. The question I ask there is, who are we? Who do we think we are? We don't have to always be small and tiny and weak and not being able to do anything. But we've got to be a bit realistic here as well. Right? So, the fact that there was zero senior representation recently at a diplomatic reception, where it was decided that it would be the chief of protocol who would deliver the statement on behalf of the government, rather unfortunate. Now, this is where, of course, that's a decision made. That's a foreign policy decision that has been made, and you've got to live with the consequences, whatever they may be. But when we talk about graciousness and how we are going out there and engaging in diplomacy with the world, we need to be much more savvy. We need to understand nuances, read between the lines. Everything is not black and white in diplomacy. It's a lot of gray out there. Now, how do we understand that? Do we respond to that? We are also coming to a position where we have not yet been able to grapple with some of the bigger issues. Within Sri Lanka, we're so encumbered with what is going on in the country, and we have so many issues to deal with. We're ignoring some of the main international developments which are having an impact on us. We go to 2018, we had a constitutional coup in this country where changes were made, leaders were brought in, taken out. At that time, India had launched a very important project to deepen their ports. Now, we're not looking at that. We're not talking about Vishinjin, Andaman Islands, some of the other developments. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, those projects will really rise up. And then we'll think, when did this start? How did this impact us? Why is it impacting us? We've gone further down the road then. We need to preempt these things. We need to see these problems coming up. Or rather use the word challenges coming up. Convert those challenges into opportunities. How do we work with these countries? How do we engage with these countries? Those are things that we should be doing.
Okay. The last 4 minutes, I mean, I have so many questions for you, but since we have almost run out of time, speak to us about the case for integration strategy and the way forward for Sri Lanka.
One thing that we've really got to start doing now in a very vigorous manner is strategizing and knowing what we want to achieve in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years. But it should not be a case of looking at it as though when I am there for the next 10 years or I am there for the next 15 years. We have to look at it for the country. It has to be bipartisan. It has got to be something where everyone is going to appreciate. It's got to be a national policy. This is where, if you look at a country like Oman, the Oman dockyard talks about policies for the next 25 years. And the chairman says, we are planning for the next 25 years because our predecessors planned for where we are today.
Okay.
We will not be there to reap the rewards.
Right.
The Chinese are talking about their centenary in 2049. Now, the current president is not expecting to be there until 2049, but they're strategizing for that. Look at how the Chinese are looking long term. They don't want anything affecting their trajectory of how they are trying to rise in terms of being a superpower on the world stage. We need to learn lessons from countries around us. Look at India beautifully engaging in diplomacy right now. You're buying oil from Russia. You're on a state visit in Washington. Amazing. That's because of the caliber of personalities that they have in positions, key positions. Minister Jai Shankar, some of their ambassadors out there, they're making such a revolutionary change there. It's an amazing balancing of power, balancing of international relations that is taking place. So this is where we need to learn from examples. We need to review the process, look at what others are doing, understand that, look within, review our own process. What have we done? What has our past been like? We have not been non-entities on the world stage. We have also done a lot on the world stage. Go back to that, review that process. We need to think going forward, what else are we going to achieve? What are the targets that we have? What are the goals that we want to get to? It is only then that we are going to see a really revolutionary change in our foreign policy. That is what we need. We are going through on a day-to-day basis, fighting daily fires. Yes, those are necessary. That is part and parcel of operations. But foreign policy has got to be something much bigger.
Yeah, and no knee-jerk reactions.
Absolutely.
Ego is a huge issue.
This is the thing. We've got to lay those aside.
Yeah.
We've got to be magnanimous at this point. We want support. We want to engage. You can't ostracize. You can't cut off communities internationally. You have to engage with them. They may say the worst things about you, but hey, you've got to engage with them, because they are also another member on the world stage. They can gather support against you. You don't want that happening. You want everyone on your side. Imagine it, Sonali, on an individual basis. We don't want to have too much of negativity around us.
Yeah.
Countries don't want that either. This is where we have to strategize going forward.
All right, fantastic. This was very helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. George Cook, diplomatic historian and strategist. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the People's Platform. Have a safe weekend. Good night.